السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى محمد. الفاتحة بين يتعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله والدعاء على الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى، وعلى ما نوى نبينا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وعلى ما نوى سلفنا الصالحون، وعلى ما نوى محمد إسماعيل أحمد الحبشي، على ما نشاء نحن محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، غير في الأسئلة في نياتهم وأعمالنا في أعمالهم وأخلاقنا في أخلاقهم وطريقتنا في طريقتهم المقبول، وإلى حضرة النبي سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. سر الفاتحة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. رب اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين آمين. Okay, so this week, inshallah, we're going to continue to the nullifiers of ablution. Okay, the 4 things that nullify one's wudu, inshallah. But before that, a quick recap of last week. Last week we did the purificatory bath, right, the ghusl. Okay, and I mentioned the 6 causes that lead to major ritual impurity. Okay, ritual impurity being either minor or major, right, and which prevents us from ritual impurity prevents us from praying, from tawaf, circumambulating the Kaaba, the house of Allah, from holding the Quran, carrying the Quran, among other things. Okay, and Habib Ahmad Mizin, in his text, he mentions 2 of the 6. Okay, that either one gets into a state of major ritual impurity through sexual intercourse, or the emission of sexual fluid, mani. Okay, not wadi, not madhi. Yeah. So last week I think I forgot to mention that mani is pure. Okay, so when it comes out, it does not require wudu, it does not require ablution, but it obligates the bath, the purificatory bath. Okay, so that's an important point to note. But madhi and wadi, the other 2 kinds of sexual fluid, right, associated with both males and male and female. Okay, these other sexual fluids are impure. Okay, so when they pass out of the private parts, then the frontal private parts, then they require wudu. Okay, they nullify the wudu. Okay, and they should be washed before renewing or before taking the wudu again. Yeah. So he mentioned 2 of the 6 causes of ritual impurity, and last week we also specified or went into what sexual intercourse is. Okay, is the insertion of the head of the penis and the khashafa into the female farj, okay, into a farj, and the whole head must enter beyond the point which is revealed. Okay, beyond that part of the farj of the female, usually the female orifice, okay, which is revealed when squatting to relieve oneself. Okay, so the head must go past that point. Okay, then that is considered sexual intercourse, and that obligates the purificatory bath. Okay, before and up to that point, it's not considered sexual intercourse. Okay, the definition, it does not fulfill the requirements of the definition. Okay, alternatively, the other cause was emission of sexual fluid, right, i.e. not through sexual intercourse, either through whatever means, in sleep, for example, yeah, or less illicit means. Yeah. So if this is the case, then one should look for the 3 distinguishing characteristics of mani, right, of semen, of ejaculate, which is in terms of its smell, right, and in terms of its emission in spurts, right, with the feeling that one gets after that, and in terms of the smell spurts and the sexual gratification. Okay, because as opposed to madhi and wadi, for example, there is no sexual gratification, right, nor do they come in spurts. Okay, so one must be able to distinguish between mani, wadi, and madhi. Okay, that's important. Okay, so that was what we covered last week. And then of course we went to the specifics or the details of the ritual bath. right? So one must make the intention, right? That one is intending to lift the janaba from oneself, the state of major ritual impurity. And one cannot just intend simply just the bath alone, because a bath is taken for reasons of worship as well as reasons of custom. Conventionally we just to clean ourselves or to cool down, to cool off. Okay, so it's required in the intention that one specifies that this bath is taken for the purposes of worship, i.e. to lift the major ritual impurity, okay, to lift the state of janaba or hadath al-akbar. Okay, so one can intend either nawaitu raf al-hadath al-akbar, or nawaitu raf al-janaba, or nawaitu fard al-ghusl, for example. Okay, but ghusl itself is not sufficient. Yeah, the bath, intending the bath itself is not sufficient. So those are important. The intention is one of the integrals of the bath, and the second is that water must reach every part of the body, right? External and internal, hair, thick or thin, right, and the skin. Yeah. So for the parameters of this second one, that water reaches the whole body, one should the validity, okay, of water of the wash of the bath. Then you should look to the session before that, where we talked about the 15 conditions of validity for the purificatory bath, the ghusl and wudu. Okay, the same conditions apply for both. Okay, so that's it what we did last week, inshallah. So this week we're going to proceed into the nullifiers of ablution. Okay, قال شيخ المؤلف أدام الله نفع به وبكم وبعلم شيخنا في الدارين آمين. وينقض الوضوء الخارج من أحد السبيلين، القبول أو الدبر على ما كان. وينقض الوضوء زوال العقل بنوم أو غيره إلا نوم ممكن مقعدته من الأرض. وينقض الوضوء مس قبل أو دبر آدمي منه أو من غيره ببطن الكف وبطون الأصابع، كبيرا كان أو صغيرا، ولو ولده ولو ميتا. وينقض الوضوء التقاء بشرتي رجل وامرأة كبيرين أجنبيين بلا حائل إلا ظفرا أو شعرا أو سنا فلا ينقض الوضوء. Okay, so those are the four things that nullify, okay, our ablution, which means that we are obliged to take ablution afresh. Okay, we have to take new ablution again. The one is now put in a state of hadath. Okay, so the one who had ablution before was in a state of ablution. If any of these four things does any of these four things or happens to him, right, then that ablution is nullified, right, and one has to take it again. Okay, so the first of the four things that nullify ablution is the emission of anything from the two private parts, i.e. the front or the rear. Okay. Okay, so the basis of this is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The prayer of one in a state of ritual impurity is not accepted until he performs ablution. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, when they say, the scholars say emission, okay, the emission of anything means that something must come out. Yeah. So something must come out from one of the, either of the private parts, front or rear. Right, it must come out from the interior, right? And wudu is not nullified, right? It's not made invalid by inserting something. Okay, so insertion of something does not nullify wudu. Something coming out does nullify wudu. So, for example, if one were to insert a suppository, okay, or other medication into the orifice, okay, front or rear, while in a state of wudu, that does not nullify. The insertion itself does not nullify the wudu. Of course, if one touches the qubul or dubur, okay, the front private parts or the rear, then that does, which we will cover shortly. Okay, one of the things that does nullify ablution, but the insertion itself does not. Okay, but something coming out does. Okay, if something were to come pass from the interior to the exterior, from the inside to the outside, that does nullify wudu. So for example, the suppository that one put in, or sometimes suppository, for example, one puts in the suppository, and then after that, if you move around a little bit, maybe the suppository comes out just a tiny little bit, that nullifies wudu. Okay, so that person now has to go and take wudu. Or if, for example, if we have, somebody has a hemorrhoid, yeah, so one has already taken wudu, for example, and then a hemorrhoid pops out, drops out, then that person's wudu is then nullified because something has been emitted. There's an emission. Yeah, if it goes back inside after wudu, for example, yeah, then the one's wudu is not nullified. Yeah, so if one has wudu, after one takes wudu, the hemorrhoid pops out. Right? There's an emission in the form of that hemorrhoid. It comes out. One's wudu is nullified. But if after that it goes back, after taking wudu again, it goes back in, then it's not nullified, okay, by the going in. Okay, and scholars also talk about the hemorrhoids, the associated bleeding. Okay, so for example, if hemorrhoid bleeds while it's still inside, and that emission passes from the interior to the exterior, then that nullifies wudu. But if the hemorrhoid is on the outside and it bleeds, then that does not nullify wudu. Okay, so a poignant metaphor or hypothetical that the scholars give is that if someone were to insert a measuring tape, for example, the soft measuring tape tailors use, to measure the waist and all that kind of. But so there are the gradations, right, of maybe up to 1 mm. Yeah. So assuming someone, for example, hypothetically were to put in the measuring tape into one's frontal or rear private parts, right? So as long as it stays, you can see the actual length, right? The gradation at which separates between the interior and the exterior. Right? As long as that stays in that position, for example, then hypothetically speaking, of course, then one's wudu is not broken. But if it comes out by even 1 mm, right, then the wudu is broken. Okay, so it struck me myself also when I was studying that this was a poignant, it sticks to one's memory. The measuring tape, but it elucidates, it illustrates the point very well. Yeah, so it brings it closer to our minds, to our understanding. Okay, and this emission must be certain. Okay, one must be certain that there has been an emission. It cannot be a suspicion. Okay, it's not enough to nullify the wudu. One must be certain. So if, for example, during prayer one senses that there's some movement and there's some emission, right? And after prayer, for example, one finds that that indeed there's a mark, or there has been some discharge, then one has to pray that prayer again. Okay, but suspicion alone is not enough, and this emission it nullifies the wudu. Okay, the discharge nullifies wudu whether or not it is momentary, like just for 1 moment, or continuous for a minute, or on and off, or intermittent, right? Whether it's intentional or not, right? Consciously or not. Okay, so in any case, it nullifies. In all these cases, it nullifies the wudu. Okay. So number 1 is the emission of anything from the 2 private parts, front or rear. Okay, so we've covered emission, right? What it means, what it does not. Okay, anything refers to the thing that is emitted. Okay, whether this is something normal or abnormal or exceptional. Yeah, something, whether it's wet or dry. So whether it's normal, for example, urine, feces, wind, yeah, or abnormal. Okay, wind, or also to bring the point earlier, right? Or wadi or madhi. Okay, so these are all impurities, right? Urine, feces, wind, madhi, wadi, madhi, wadi, right, etc., or something that is exceptional or abnormal. Okay, for example, stones, blood, or even a worm. Okay, so some people have worms. Now, some people have worms. This, I think, some worms, even if you had a worm, if for example you have a worm that rears its head out and then returns back in, okay, pops its head out and then goes back in, right? That is considered something that nullifies the ablution, the wudu. Okay, so the emission of anything from the two private parts. Okay. Okay, so from the two private parts refer to those of a living person, right? So we're talking about a living person in a state of ablution, of course, right? For wudu to be nullified, then that person must first be in a state of wudu. Yeah. Okay, so some of the private parts of a living person, i.e., not a dead person, because if the person is dead, then that for the deceased, that does not nullify the wudu that somebody else has already taken for them, right? Okay, but it's obligatory, it's wajib to remove the filth, wash, and and okay, so that's obligatory on the one tending to the body. Okay, but the dead person's wudu is not nullified by emission. There is no need to take wudu again for that person. Okay, so when we say the private parts, that anything, the emission of anything from the private parts, that means what nullifies wudu is when these things, or any of these things, come out from the private parts. Okay, so for example, nosebleeds do not nullify wudu, vomiting does not nullify wudu, or cupping, bloodletting does not nullify wudu, or crying. Okay, so these things are not things that nullify wudu. They don't nullify the ablution, but it is sunnah to, for bloodletting and for nosebleeds and for vomiting, it is sunnah to then take wudu after that. Yeah, but it does not. These things do not nullify the emission of these things from other parts of the body. Does not nullify wudu. Okay. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this has to be with certainty. Yeah, the emission one has to be certain about the emission. It cannot be suspicion, and it cannot be no uncertainty. Right? If one is uncertain, then one has wudu. Yeah, until one is certain. Yeah, and money is the only thing that is emitted, right? That does not break one's wudu. Okay, so with the exception of money. Okay, with the exception of sexual fluid. Okay, that does not break one's wudu. Okay, of course there is a you have to think about it a bit, because before money must come madhi, the sexual fluid that comes when one is aroused, right, with different characteristics to money. But before money, that normally in normal circumstances, before ejaculation, right, of money, there must be madhi. Okay, so madhi, generally the scholars say is impure, right? But there are scholars who say who consider it to be pure. Okay, but when madhi passes out of the sexual organ or the waste passage, for example, if madhi passes out, that does nullify wudu. Okay, but when mani passes out, it does not nullify wudu, but it obligates the bath. Right? It becomes wajib for us to take the purificatory bath to lift the state of ritual impurity, right, that is brought on by the emission of mani, of sexual fluid, okay, of ejaculate. Okay, so that's an important point to take note of. Okay, and also to be aware of. So if we're saying money does not the emission of money does not nullify wudu, but madhi does, and madhi usually comes before money, so it's laid out there for you to think about. Because we have mentioned earlier about people who face certain chronic conditions, like continuous intermittent emission of discharge, including madhi and blood, for people who have irregular periods, okay, irregular bleeding and so on. So please go back to those slides, if you need to check anything with regards to those things. Okay, so second, Okay. Second of the things that nullifies wudu is losing one intellect during sleep or otherwise, except the sleep of one sitting down with one's posterior firmly fixed on the ground. Okay, as per the book. Okay. So this is per the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, the eye, when awake, is the string to the anus, yeah, to stop air escaping, okay, to stop the passing of wind. And the one who sleeps should perform ablution. Okay, so when we lose consciousness, right, or we enter into a reduced state of consciousness, we have less control over certain muscle groups. Yeah, so the one who sleeps should perform ablution. Okay, so when we're talking about sleep, right, to lose one's intellect during sleep or otherwise. Okay, I missed some point here. Okay, so with regards to intellect, right, the meaning of the intellect as given by Imam Shafi'i, the akal, okay, the intellect of the akal is that the intellect is like a tree, right, whose roots are in the heart, but whose branches reach up to the brain. Okay, so there's a connection between body and or rather between heart and mind, yeah, between the heart and the brain at least. So I thought that was a fascinating definition or description. Okay, the akal is also from the Arabic akala. It means to tie things down, to tie or to restrain. So the akal also has the meaning of tying down meanings. So we use the akal to tie down, to capture meanings, to understand meaning, right? And also there's the other in the sense of restraint, in the sense of there's a sense of restraint in the sense of restraining us from disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so the one who gets involved in acts of disobedience, then that one is not called the aqil, the one of intellect, the one possessed of intellect, okay, or intelligence. Okay, so when this akal goes, right, when one loses one's intellect, then the state of hadath takes over one. Okay, one enters into a state of, or is entered into a state of hadath, of ritual impurity. Okay, so sleep. When we mention sleep, right, losing one's intellect during sleep. Okay, sleep is when in terms of the definition, or in terms of the parameters of what is considered to be sleep, it's when we lose consciousness, and are unable to hear speech. Okay, or when if one's you doze off, right, deep enough such that you're not able to hear sleep, not able to hear speech, right, or if one tries to wake you, it takes a bit of you take a bit of waking to return to consciousness, right? It's not as simple as, hey, wake up, you can't hear when people are talking to you, so you have to be tapped or shaken, right? Or of course if you're dreaming, right, then to sleep is to dream, perchance to dream. We're not talking about Hamlet, of course, yeah. But so of these are the indicators of sleep, yeah. So that when one is unconscious and not able to hear other people's speech, right, or needs a bit of waking, right, or is dreaming, obviously, so that's considered sleep. Okay, when we mention or otherwise, okay, so or otherwise, other than sleep, right, losing the intellect through other than sleep is through insanity, unconsciousness, fits, or drunkenness. Okay, which meanings have been defined already by the scholars, but I think it's sufficiently clear for us and not to have to go into this, right? Okay, what is excluded by sleep? Okay, what is excluded by sleep? What I mentioned earlier, the three descriptions of what sleep is. What is excluded by that is drowsiness or daydreaming. Okay, so that in that case, one who is drowsing, yeah, can hear the words of those present, although maybe not in a sense that one is able to comprehend or to understand what's being said, but one can still hear the words, so that's considered drowsing. Yeah, so that is what is excluded by sleep. Okay, so the one who is drowsing is not considered sleeping, right? And therefore his ablution is not what do you call this? Is not nullified. Yeah, his wudu is not nullified. Okay, so from the hadith of Sayyidina Anas radiallahu anhu, the companions used to wait for the night prayer, the Isha prayer, until their heads were lowered down by dozing, and then they offered prayer without performing ablution. So when the time for prayer came, they just got up and they went straight to prayer. Okay, so this is how, because they were sitting according to this way, according to the exception that Ahmad bin Zain specifies here, right? So one's wudu, one's ablution is nullified if one loses one's intellect during sleep, okay, or otherwise, as above, as specified above, except for the sleep of one who is sitting down with one's posterior firmly fixed on the ground, right? And this has conditions, okay, to qualify for this, meaning that the one who sleeps in this way with this and fulfills these conditions is not considered to be in the kind of sleep which nullifies one's wudu. Okay, so one's wudu is not nullified if one sleeps in this way, okay, with these 4 conditions. Okay, so first of all, one's bum cheeks are both on the ground, okay, and closed, such that the anus is closed, and does not allow wind to pass. Okay, number 1. Number 2, that the one who is doing this is not too fat or too thin. Okay, so the one has a normal constitution, or one is not one-sided. So maybe an amputee, with one arm cut off, right, or 2 limbs, right, an arm and a leg maybe, right. So that kind of person might not be able to maintain balance that's required to keep the cheeks together to shut the anus, right, when one falls asleep. Okay, so this is the second condition. That one wakes up in the same position that one fell asleep in. So for example, if one sitting down, right, and that's this kind of position, the sitting position, this seated position, firm seated position, it includes when one lifts one's knees to one's chest, for example, yeah, as the Hadarim like to do, and tie, yeah, there's a tie to tie, and ties the knees to the chest, okay, around the back. Okay, so as long as one is firmly on the ground and not swaying, right, then that is still okay. Okay, so for the one has to wake up in the position that one fell asleep in, okay, even if one falls asleep in that kind of position, as long as one wakes up in the same position, that fulfills this condition. So for example, if one wakes up and is lying down now suddenly on one's back or side, then one has fallen short of the condition, and one has to go and take wudu. Yeah, has to go and not renew, but go and take ablution again. Okay, fourthly, that one is not informed by a just person, okay, that he passed wind. Okay, so this is of Imam Ibn Hajar and Imam Ramli said you must be informed by someone who is ma'soom. Okay, so these are Imam Ibn Hajar and Imam Ramli are the 2 go-to scholars for the Shafi'i madhab, right, between whose texts we have the relied upon positions of the madhabs, of the madhab of Imam Shafi'i today, that we rely upon today. Okay, so I haven't been mentioning these scholars because this is a low-level text, right, but it's important to remember the names, right. Okay, so now it's out there, you please take note that the scholars that we rely upon, right, mostly are relied upon greatly are Imam Ibn Hajar and Imam Ramli radiyallahu anhuma. Okay, so one is not informed by a just person. So if one happens to be informed by a just person, right, then once that one has passed wind, right, then one's wudu is nullified. One is obliged to go and take wudu again if one wants to pray. Okay, and so what is a just person? A just person, or adil, is the one who does not commit major sins, right, nor persists in minor sins. Okay, does not commit kaba'ir, right, and does not persist, repeat in repetition, not repetitive in the sagha'ir, the smaller sins. Okay, of course, this again is with certainty. Okay, so for example, someone who is not sure whether one fell asleep, right, or was it drowsed. Okay, the one who is not sure whether he slept or drowsed, then that person, and before that he was certainly on a state of wudu, certainly in a state of ablution, right, then that person is considered to still be in a state of ablution, because doubt does not remove certainty. Okay, so as long as one was certain before falling asleep that one was indeed in a state of ablution. Okay, so thirdly, okay, touching human private parts, whether front or rear, whether one's own or another's, with the palm of the hand or the inside of the fingers, even if it be that of one's own child or a dead person's. Okay, so a dead person's private parts or that of one's own child. Okay, this is because this is based on the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, "He who touches his penis should perform ablution." Okay. So first of all, it should be, we're talking about human private parts. Okay, so what are the human private parts? When we mention human private parts, that means what is excluded by this are animal parts. Okay, so if one was to touch an animal penis or anus or whatever, whether front or rear, and that does not nullify ablution. Okay, only human parts do. So excluded by the definition is animal. Right? What is animal does not nullify. Okay, so for the penis, the kubul, for the male is the penis, and that is the body and the head of the penis. Okay, so the body being the length and the head of the penis, not to the point where it's attached to the body. Okay, so that part all the way down to the base of the stem, right, the base of the body. Okay, the base itself is not does not nullify wudu, does not nullify ablution. Yeah, so the base, the rest of the body, the pubes, the pubic area, the pubic hair, the area of the skin where the pubic hair grows from, the scrotum, the part below the scrotum before the anus. Okay, so none of that nullifies wudu. None of those parts nullify wudu. Right? With regards to the male private part, it is the body of the body itself, right, of the penis, and the head of the penis, the head and the body. That's all. Okay, with regards to females, the vagina, that what nullifies wudu is the part of the clitoral hood where the labia minora meet. Okay, so this is the clitoral hood, right? These are the lips, right? And these are the labia minora. Okay, either side, right? This is, so this part here, right? This part here nullifies wudu. The rest of it on the sides does not nullify wudu. Okay, so it's important. That's important to note, because some people need to fix their panties. Right? So we need to know, right, whether if one accidentally touches the labia majora, the greater parts around the sides, right, whether that nullifies wudu, that does not nullify wudu. Yeah, so of course, if one does touch the human, the parts that does nullify wudu, the clitoral hood and the labia minora, where they meeting point, then that cannot be accidental. Okay, so the intention cannot have been to just adjust underwear, for example. Yeah. Okay, for the rear, right, the anus, so the human anus is the third private part. Okay, which the touching of which nullifies wudu. Okay, so that refers to the sides of the opening, okay, or the puckered area that is exposed when one squats to nullify oneself. So maybe if one looks this way, right, normally, right, so that's, if it's normally like that, when one squats it opens up, right? So it's that area that opens up when one squats, when the bum cheeks are spread. Okay, so that area. So the bum cheeks themselves do not nullify wudu. Okay, touching the bum cheeks, touching the cheeks of one's posterior does not nullify wudu. Okay, nor does touching breasts, right, or one's bum, breasts. Okay, these do not nullify wudu. Okay, of course these are when you're talking about touching these parts on the same sex. Okay, so of course if you touch another man, or rather the different between the sexes, right, a man touching a woman's, then that nullifies wudu, but not on account of touching the breast, for example, but because of the meeting of skin. Okay, not under, which we will cover next week, inshallah. Right, but for this week, it's important to note, okay, that these are the definitions, okay, of the what constitutes human private parts. Okay, the penis, the body, and the head, the vagina, and the anus. Okay, as such. Okay, and what if it's defined as touching? Okay, it's also important to note. So look carefully. Okay. So one touches, right? The touch that nullifies wudu is when one touches with the palm or the inside of the fingers. Okay. The palm or the inside of the fingers, meaning like this. So the area, when you see look at my palms, the area that cannot be seen when I do this. Okay. When I do this, the area that cannot be seen. When I do this, when I bring my palms together like this and apply a little bit of pressure, the area that cannot be seen, the area of skin that cannot be seen, yeah, these are considered the palms and these are considered the parts which if you touch with these parts, then that will nullify wudu. Okay, so these parts and these actually. So the thumb is the parts which are touching between my two hands, right? So it's part of the thumb, yeah, and all of this, but not what's in between. Okay, so this part and this part, this part, this part. Yeah, so these parts, if one happens to touch human private parts with any of these parts, the wudu is not nullified. The ablution is not nullified with these parts. So, for example, you have a little son, little boy, right, who wants to go to the bathroom, and one needs to help it with the aim, right? So one goes like that. Okay, so going like that does not nullify one's wudu. Okay, so your wudu is still intact. The ablution is still intact because it's not touching with the palms, right, or the insides of the fingers. Yeah. Okay, and for example, so the side of the palm does not nullify wudu, right? This the pincer, in between the fingers, wudu is not nullified by touching private parts with that part of the skin. Okay. Okay, and in the event, for example, okay, to clarify, to make clear the example, if, for example, one man touches another man's penis, okay, touching meaning with that part that when you touch with these parts, the wudu is nullified. Okay, when one uses these parts to touch somebody else, for example, a man touching another man's penis, right, then the one who touched the private part, right, the toucher of the private part, his wudu is his ablution is nullified. He has to take wudu, but not the man who is touched. Okay, so here we're talking specifically about touching private parts. So if somebody touches somebody else's private parts of people of the same sex, right, which means that the touching of the skin is not what nullifies wudu when they're of the same sex. When one touches one man touches another man's private parts, or a boy's private parts, or a dead person's private parts, okay, of the same sex, then the one that does the touching, the toucher, his ablution is nullified, his wudu is nullified, but not the one that is touched. Okay, for the wudu or the ablution of the one who is touched, right, is not nullified. Okay. So that's it, inshallah, for this week. So next week, inshallah, we'll do the fourth thing that identifies ablution, and we will cover some of the things that people without ablution are not allowed. People who are in a ritual state of impurity are not allowed to do, a haram for them to do, a forbidden to do. Yeah, and recap, inshallah. Okay, wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
يا ربنا اعترفنا بأننا اقترفنا وأننا أسرفنا على لظى أشرفنا فضلا وجودا منا لا باكتساب منا بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سول.